welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowden Deli. I'm Aaron Rand, along with Bill Brownstein of the Gazette, Lesley Chesterman, and our special guest today, Alain Babineau. I want to thank our sponsors, first of all, the folks here at Snowden Deli, and also our friends over at Guaranteed Industries and Empire Gold. So, Alain, first of all, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Give people some background. 30 years in law enforcement. You worked with the RCMP, you worked with the OPP, and you're working now with an organization called the Red Coalition. So let's begin by explaining what you do there.
That's correct. I'm actually a director of racial profiling and public safety, dealing with the issue, obviously, on racial profiling with the Red Coalition, which is a lobbyist, civil rights, human rights organization here in Montreal.
So we are talking today, and the reason we're gathered today is for what happened here just a couple of days ago, I guess maybe a week ago now. Yet another incident of racial profiling, another driving while black incident. You have been involved in these before, and it doesn't seem that whatever outrage there is, and I think outrage is a fair word, nothing seems to have changed. Now, you're a former police officer. You saw what happened to Mr. Bosa the other day.
Didn't even get into his car to drive.
Stopped by two plainclothes officers who never even identified themselves, from what we understand, as police. What went wrong here?
Well, a lot of things went wrong. I mean, people make mistakes, but if you are big enough to admit that you've made a mistake, that's where I think what happened here. Again, people are focusing a lot on this the issue of losing a key, handcuffs, key, and that's very embarrassing, obviously. But I think my focus is really on the demeanor of the police officers at the scene, as well as the response from the initial response from the SPVM on the incident itself.
What's absolutely shocking to me is this goes on and on and on. A ruling came down not long ago saying that advising police not to pull over people on the basis of color and yet it just never ends. Mm-hmm. There's no systemic racism here, right?
Well, what do you call it? Systemic or institutional racism or discrimination? Well, something is well ingrained into an organization. Then it's very difficult to change the culture unless there's a willingness to do so.
And there's no willingness.
I haven't seen any evidence of that, personally.
Well, wait, but I want to get, do you feel really there's no willingness on police to do that? Because, the excuse is always, well, there will always be a few bad apples. You don't buy that?
No, of course there will always be a few bad apples. That's not the issue. The issue is whether the organization and the leadership of the organization is willing to actually affect meaningful changes. We're not talking about issues of diversity and inclusion. I mean, that's always on the table, obviously, but we're talking about changing the ways in which you do police work. There has to be a will, but also there has to be a political will. Because I think at the end of the day, the police service is just an arm of the administration of the politics. So yeah, I haven't seen any evidence of willingness to effect meaningful changes.
The Corner Booth Podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowden Deli, serving Montrealers since 1946 and home of the city's best smoked meat sandwich, the Snowden Deli, DeCarry Boulevard, north of Queen Mary Road.
Wouldn't the administration advise every single day to the rank and file cops, please, the whole world might be watching. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Even if you might harbor some ridiculous racist notions, people may be watching and taking videos. Wouldn't that not be a deterrent? But yet they continue to do so. I don't get it. I don't understand.
Well, that's part of leadership, right? You have to continuously reinforce the values of the organization, the what it is that the organization stands for. You have to also warn, if you want to call it that, violators, that there will be repercussion and sanction on misbehavior, and there's none of that happening that I've seen here in Montreal.
Well, whose fault is that?
Well, again, it's I would say that when there's no political will or leadership will, there's no way. So I'll leave it at that.
So is that municipal? Is that the head of the police department? Is that the provincial government? What is it in your opinion?
Or the union?
What I had seen is, and I've posted that the other day and so I stand by it. I mean, I see that the police that the police is afraid of the union, and the city is afraid of the police. So who's running the show?
The police is afraid of the union, and the city's afraid of the police. Who appoints the chief of police?
Well, here in Montreal, actually, it's a dual process. It has to be approved by the public safety minister because it's a large police service, and according to the Police Act, that's the way
Right.
the appointment is decided. But so the city has to. But there's a process going on right now, as you know, where for selection of the police chief, and once the police chief has been selected, then it's being submitted. It will be submitted to the public safety minister, the new Mr. Bonardel, I believe his name is, and it ought to be a rubber stamp. Most of the time it is, but that's.
Well,
a
we've been
process.
through our share of police chiefs in this city,
yeah.
and nothing seems to have changed. So are you optimistic or pessimistic that anything will change?
It's not really about the police chief. It's about the willingness of making change. It's about having the moral fortitude to make change in spite of the pressure, as I mentioned, that will come from the union. And as I said, historically in this city, the union, the fraternity, as they call it, has been extremely strong, and in my opinion, has had its ways with the police chiefs. And those police chiefs, by the way, that dared opposing the union have been dismissed quite speedily.
I have a question though when it comes to this. But what about recruiting and training?
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about the situation, but even for when policemen or policewomen, at the beginning is when they're recruiting. Are these questions coming up in the training for police officers? Are these issues coming up?
These are very good questions. First of all, here in this province, it's a kind of a unique recruiting and, well, not recruiting, but training process whereby every single police candidate has to go through a CEGEP, a 3-year CEGEP program, which is highly difficult to get in because of what I call systemic barriers, and we can talk about that. And once they graduate, then they go to the police college. Okay,
How many years is that?
In Nicolette, that's about, well, we'll call it a year, but it's
Okay.
It's a few, So that's that, and then they have to be hired by a police service. And so I'll give you some quick stats. About 90% of graduates from the CEGEP program in Technique Policière are homogeneous. In other words, they're Caucasian white male. And there's more females now, I would say. As a matter of fact, a whole lot more females, in the majority white females. And so those are the folks that go to police college. So, and then the folks that graduate from the police college are representative of the pool from where they came from.
Right. Is
And
anybody
so-
at any point weeding out people who are obviously racist, or is there any kind of are any of the people in charge saying that guy will make a terrible cop, or that I say guy, but is there any of that editing out people who could be problematic later on?
I think there is. We recently, the Red Coalition, we recently met with the director of l'École nationale de police de Québec, and they're very aware of that, and they're doing some type of screening. It's not always that easy. I mean, no one's going to be
Right.
showing up wearing a KKK robe, but there is some,
Right.
and they're paying
Comments,
close attention.
demeanor,
Yeah, they're paying close attention to that. But the problem is not really there, if I may. The problem is really when they graduate and come on to the police service, because I'm going to tell you, when you're a young rookie, one of the first thing, and that's not just a TV thing, one of the first thing you're told once you get on the job and you're being assigned a coach officer is that, hey, you listen, you forget everything you learned in the academy. I'm going to show you how the real work gets done.
Right. It's like Training Day.
Yeah.
That movie,
Well,
yeah.
it doesn't be Hollywood, but in essence, it's very true.
So you part of what you do, and I think this is, if I can go back to the story that happened this week with a guy being stopped by plainclothes officers, handcuff the guy, don't tell him they're police, wait for an SPVM car to show up with a key to unlock the handcuffs. You deal in conflict resolution. You study conflict resolution. What should have happened in that case?
Well, what should have happened is you should have had police officers that show compassion. that first of all acknowledge their wrong. You know, people make mistakes. So do police officers. And so there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, sir, we're sorry. First of all, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. You got a question as to why this person was handcuffed in the first place, right? Because they were investigating a potential vehicle that looked like potentially being stolen. Why? We don't know, but anyhow.
Well, didn't they say they had a report that that car had been stolen?
I don't think so. I think they saw
They,
some
just,
marks.
they said there were marks
There
on the
was
car,
markings
and there
and-
were no marks apparently
Right.
on the car.
In of itself, let's say
Okay.
that's true. All right. So then the owner of the vehicle came out of the restaurant or wherever he was, and he was grabbed from behind, tossed against the car, and cuffs put on him. Why did that happen? That's the number one question you have to ask, because I've put handcuffs on people for very good reasons, because they were either dealing drugs or, you know, they had committed an obvious criminal offense. And so the reason you put handcuffs on people is either they're going to be a danger to you as a police officer, or they're going to destroy the evidence or whatever the case. So there has to be some valid reasons. So you have to wonder whether they thought because of blackmail that he was potentially dangerous, and we needed to obviously, control him very.
So that was mistake number one.
That's the mistake number one.
And the aggression.
That's what I'm saying. The aggression as to what
Right.
precipitated you in pushing the guy against the
Right,
car,
right.
grabbing his arm and put the handcuffs on him.
Right.
What did he do?
Right.
And then what from there?
And then from there, they probably got his somehow they got his identification, his registration and whatnot, and lo and behold, he's the registered owner. Oh, okay, so I messed up. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. Okay, so you know what? We made a mistake. We had some information about a stolen vehicle, and now we just verified you're the registered owner. We apologize. And then, of course, the handcuff situation. Oh, well, you know what, sir? We apologize again. We're sorry.
Don't have the keys.
We're sorry. We understand. We're comfortable. We've already made a call. We're going to get some backups and folks with the keys, and we're.
But
and
none
then-
of that. But
none of that happened. As a matter of fact, this video could have been a tremendous promotional video for the SPVM
Sure.
in showing compassion, admitting mistakes, because it's not a matter of getting sued or not. So you're going to get sued anyhow. Whether you admit, you made a mistake or not, you're going to get sued anyhow if you're going to get sued. So it's really about public perception as to, and I say this a lot, and we as police officers, we have within our culture this thing about we're never wrong. And we stick to that, and no matter what, we push back on this very notion that we've made a mistake, and that's wrong, and that's wrong-headed, in my opinion.
But aren't police, when they train, when you go to Nicolet,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to imagine conflict resolution, certainly in the last couple of years, would be something you would teach a police officer.
100%,
Right.
100%. But then forget about what you learn in Nicolet. I'm going to show you how it's done.
On the street.
Yeah.
The Corner Booth Podcast is brought to you in part by Guaranteed Industries, in business since 1957, taking care of all your heating and air conditioning needs. And remember, they're a Lennox Premier dealer. Guaranteed Industries online at guaranteedindustries.com or call 514-342-3400.
How often do they mess up like that with white people? As I mentioned, I've been driving.
We don't know because they're not collecting race-based data. That
Right.
That we've been asking for a number of years, and they refuse to do it. So we don't know.
I've been driving a car for almost 50 years. I've never ever been, except for maybe an infraction here and there for a stop sign or something. I've never been stopped for no particular reason. No white guy that I know has ever been stopped. No white woman I know. And yet I have black friends, women, and men who've been stopped frequently over the years. So, I mean, it's...
That is part of this notion of...
It's more than messing up.
Well, it's stereotypes that's well ingrained in society at large. I don't know, we have enough time to talk about this stuff, but you can go back to education, you can go back to the medical field, you can go back to when you have stereotypes that have been sort of promoted into your education, your value system, what have you, as to who is a criminal and what does a criminal look like. Okay, I would argue that there's a certain stereotype and profile of pedophiles, and those that fit that look and that profile and that idea, if those people were actually getting stopped every day, I think there'd be some really serious calls being made to the premier in terms of, hey, listen, we can't. My uncle just got stopped up because he looked like he was stereotyped as a pedophile. And okay, we can't have that. And but when it comes to black folks, unfortunately, it's well ingrained in society. Not just Quebec, but it's well ingrained in society, and police officers are part of the society, and they act on those stereotypes, and because they need to guess as to who might be a criminal, right? There's no crystal ball, but they have to, and of course they rely too heavily on those kind of stereotypes.
But you've worked across Canada. Is this the worst in Montreal, Quebec, in terms of that kind of racial profiling, driving while black?
Well,
trying to get into a car while black?
No, these things have happened. I've lived in Toronto. It happens a lot. In Nova Scotia, BC. I mean, so I don't think it's any worse. Well, here, there's a very strong resistance to the very notion of systemic racism, and I think it plays into the ways in which we don't resolve the issue, and we don't take measures, significant measures to hold people to account. And I think that is at the heart of it all.
I think one of the things that's also changed over the years is the fact that social media, everybody having a camera on their phone.
Right.
How many of these incidents happened in years past? We never even found out.
A whole lot of, matter of fact, probably worse. It was worse in some ways. Like I could tell you stories until.
I got time.
Yeah, but but it's worse. But the thing is, you're absolutely right. And then, of course, police officers resent that. Now they're and particularly the older guys.
Yeah.
The guys that were around when these cameras didn't exist, and now they can't do what they used to do back in behind the veil of ignorance.
Yeah. I want to go touch back on something you said a minute ago in answer to Bill's question. This idea that in this particular case, the one we're talking about where the guy was handcuffed for no apparent reason other than they pretended or thought the car had been stolen. They tell you as a driver, if you're in an accident, never admit fault, never admit guilt, right? You're not supposed to do that. Mm-hmm. Is that the code with police, do you think, as well? Because you said here the thing to have done here would have been to say, we're sorry, we thought this, but it turns out, we were wrong. Are you taught not to ever admit that you're wrong or say you're sorry?
I was never taught that. I hope no one is being taught that, because that would be, in my opinion, very wrong-headed. It's different than a no-fault accident or that kind of, car accident. It's a little bit different than that. I think, human nature is what it is, and admitting a mistake is nothing wrong with that.
Have you ever seen that happen?
But I think,
ever seen that happen? Police say.
As I said, in our culture, in the policing culture, we have this thing that we're never wrong. So it's kind of systemic.
Right.
We use the dangerous word.
Never apologize, never explain.
Yeah, never explain.
But then are policemen hotheads who, there's the thing too, is that are they overly powerful? Is there too much aggression? Should they take a step back? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of...
Yeah, a lot of that. A lot of that.
That's why we're all a little scared when you get pulled over. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in policing. I would say, the vast majority of police officers are good human beings.
Right.
But there's something in the culture that, you see, there's this thing about to serve and protect.
Right.
But the serve part is often being discarded in the protection piece.
Right.
And what it means to protect. What does that mean to protect? Is your interpretation of what it means. Does it mean to arrest the potential bandits or the ones that are the usual suspects, as we call them? Right. The service piece is often neglected, in my opinion.
What about fear? Because we can't forget that this is a job that is extremely difficult, very risky every day. Is there, as a police officer, there must be fear there too, which then acts out as over-aggression on their side?
Well,
not just in this case, but in any case.
No cop has ever been, forced to join the police profession.
Yeah, that's the job.
But-
That's a job. I mean, there's fear for a doctor of contracting some disease. I mean, it's all fear.
Right, right.
There's jobs that are high, you know, have
Because it's a
higher-
dangerous job, no matter
It's a
how you
dangerous
put it.
job.
Yeah.
If you don't want to be faced with the danger, then you
Don't do the
get
job.
another job.
The Corner Booth Podcast is brought to you in part by Empire Gold, paying the most for gold and silver and all your collectibles. 5593 Paré at Devonshire. Empire Gold, where you get paid right on the spot. All the details online, empiregold.ca. In this case, again, just to come back, so we have the Montreal Police Force now not commenting on what happened, saying that there'll be an internal investigation. I think if you had a nickel for every time they said there'd be an internal investigation and they came back and said, oh, we screwed up,
seen that
you'd
movie.
still only have a nickel.
still-
So what do you think happens here? Like, how do you see this playing out?
Christmas is coming. And so Christmas is coming, and people are going to forget. People, you know, there's parties happening and everything else like that. And you know, in French, you know, we say that la mémoire est une faculté qui oublie. We forget things very quickly. Unless, but that's one of the things with the Red Coalition. We don't forget. We have an elephant's memory, and we. You know, our thing is to keep folks to account, police services to their words. We filed I'm not diverting too much from the subject here, but we filed this past Monday. We filed a demand letter with the city of Longueuil, accusing basically them to be in contempt of court for not having put in place measures that were ordered by the court in the Bellefeuille case in 2020, which was to collect race-based data.
Right.
And so, but people have forgotten about stuff. As a matter of fact, I think the city and the police service in Longueuil also forgot. We don't forget. And so that's the problem with our society, is we forget about it. 2 years ago, there were 2 young black youth in Montreal North. The video went viral where the police officer had their knees on the kid's neck, and people were up in arms, and the mayor were, oh, c'est pas possible, Mr. Legault, and no. And the police said, well, we're going to conduct an internal investigation. Have you seen that investigation there?
So nothing happens to these police, even in this case?
What kind of
happens?
repercussions
Have you seen
do a
that
cop's
investigation?
face?
Well, this part of a systemic problem. When there's no repercussion or anything, then the signal that you're sending is, we got your back. And the union, the union came out on a tweet basically, attacking this, I think it was Alain Babineau from the public safety here in Montreal, attacking the politicians that, they're part of the problem, and that's why cops are disengaging and they're leaving and blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of militancy that's counterproductive to the work of the good cops on the road, because, as I said earlier, there's more of the citizens than there are cops, and once you're hated, it's a tough job.
So I want to turn the tables, if I can't ask you the question from a different perspective. We're talking here about an incident that most of us saw and are kind of shocked, but then again, we've seen this happen before. Do you think that sometimes we're too critical of police, as opposed to, in cases like this, it's pretty obvious what happened? Are we judging them too harshly?
Yeah, oftentimes we are, but the thing is I'm going to say the black community, because we've seen that movie repeating itself so many times, and I have not spoken or talked to a black person who has not felt the sting of being racially profiled. Okay, I have felt it. When I was a police officer, I was sent to immigration, coming back from matter of fact, a police conference in the United States when I was in the RCMP. I got to the thing, and I explained, and I was sent to immigration, not to customs to check my bag, to send to immigration. Okay, I showed them my police badge, to send to immigration, if to check who I was and if I was telling the truth. I have a friend of mine, a colleague of mine at the RCMP, who was stationed here in Quebec. He was in an RCMP uniform, driving an RCMP vehicle, and he was pulled over and then they questioned him, to see if this was real. And when he identified himself and everything else, they questioned him as to whether he had permission to drive a police car. And they checked. They checked with the dispatcher here in Montreal on Green and Dorchester. Dorchester. I'm not making this stuff up.
No, right.
And so yeah, sometimes we're judging the police very harshly, but I think there's well-deserved condemnation, and we got to bring back the pendulum. And I'm gonna say this, I think there are some media folks that are contributive to this narrative also, us and them against narrative that's going on, because I've heard some it's a French radio thing, but I'm not gonna name them, but what I heard this week, I thought it was a joke. Actually, I thought it was comedians, folks that have no clue what they're talking about. They're comedians or what? Anyway, I'm not gonna name no name, but I thought it was a comedy, and then realized no, they're serious.
Yeah.
They're actually serious. And
Talking about what? Saying
talking
what?
about this particular incident, and about we know that black people are more involved in criminalities, and then the police, and then it's like for example, if I have red cars, I'm like they're comparing black people to red cars and all kinds of unbelievable stupidities, and some folks listen to that stuff.
They have a big audience.
They have a big audience, This is a mainstream radio station, and so they contributive to the racist attitude that's out there.
So was it disappointing in this particular case not to hear someone politically, outside of the mayor perhaps here, but provincially, to stand up and say, what I saw was wrong, I want to apologize on their behalf, or I want to get an apology from them? Is that disappointing? Because I don't remember that happening.
Well, first of all, the mayor didn't say nothing until 4 or 5 days later, after everybody else had checked in. Alain Babineau came out relatively quickly, public safety minister. I must give him that. The new public safety minister provincially came out.
Racism minister Skeet, no?
He said he has to kind of
He'll
think
look
about
into it.
He'll look
Yeah.
into it, kind of think about it a minute. But and then the mayor, 5 days later came out and said, "I'm concerned," or some word like that. You know what? I don't buy none of that. And then of course you've got those black city officials elected recently, black city official, and there was radio silence. Nothing. And those are the folks that are supposed to represent the black community in some ways here in this city, and they will remain silent. Now, were they being told not to say nothing? Then what are they doing there?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I will ask one thing. You brought up Bill Christopher Skeet. So we have a minister now
In charge of
with
racism.
racism as his portfolio. He's a person of color. Are you hopeful that changes anything?
Yeah, I've had conversations with Mr. Skeet. As a matter of fact, I had conversation with his predecessor, his name is Mr.
The provincial minister.
Who was in charge of racism. These are good people. They're not bad folks. But you can say a whole lot of things. I want to see some results. I want to see some concrete actions. And, after the George Floyd incident, the Legault government put together a group of 7 folks to investigate racism in this province. Not systemic racism, but racism. So they were chasing racists all over the province. And then really quickly, rapidly, which is unbelievable because you can't launch into this kind of review within a few months. They came out with some type of report, which actually was addressing systemic issues. They never used the word systemic, but they were addressing systemic issues in the province. So it was pretty good, actually. But now I want to see some results. If I see no results, we have all kinds of reports. And,
Yeah, what did the reports do?
endlessly.
Yeah.
I want to see some results. So, I don't know. Skeet might be very good. I don't know.
We shall see. Mm-hmm. And I want to thank you so much for taking
you
the
very
time
much.
this morning to talk with us.
Thank you for
That
having
wraps
me.
up this edition of the Corner Booth. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.